everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex, and this is Big Baby Reviews. Check out my comics at KINGCOMICS.CA, Big Baby and Star Crasher. Check out my videos on YouTube. King Comics 2021 is the channel. Check me out on Instagram, MaximusRex13, and hit me up on Facebook, MaxRex and or Big Baby. So today, guys, is Friday. Hope you've got a great weekend planned for yourselves, as usual, and we are looking at Spawn number 10, the continuation of the Writer series, I guess we could call that whole run of Spawn comics early on, number 8, 9, 10, 11, that were written by some of the greatest writers of the early 90s comic scene, and Dave Sim. So Dave Sim, not that I'm trying to say that he's a bad writer, but I always kind of wondered about why exactly he was mixed in with Alan Moore, Neil Gaiman at the time, and, you know why I'm saying that, and Frank Miller. I didn't see the same level of clout for him in the comics industry, at least from my perception as a young guy back then. I understand his place in comics history more today. I've heard about some problematic situations. I hate using that word. I mean, that's how people have described it. You know, specifically if he's done anything wrong, it's hard to get to the bottom of that. I guess it depends on your opinion. Not going to get into that either, just like with Neil Gaiman. That's up to you to decide what your opinion is on those people and what they've done. But up to this point, back in the early 90s, Dave Sim was kind of seen as the independent comics guru. He was working out of his home near Toronto, I believe, at least in Canada somewhere. And making his comics and making a decent living out of it, even though not selling quite the numbers the big publishers, the mainstream publishers like Marvel and DC were doing. He was obviously keeping more of the money from each issue's sales, so had kind of a following that actually allowed him to live, from what I've heard, fairly lavishly, at least in you know, in and around the 80s and the 90s. And Tom McFarlane is Canadian, so I guess he got to know him and stuff, and you know, that is why Dave Sim is writing this issue here. And the basic theme and ideas of this issue is, you know, independent creator rights. If you're going to make comics and create what today people are calling intellectual property, do it for yourself, keep the rights, and control your creation's destiny is basically the idea, right? And that you should reap most of the benefits from your creation. So a lot of guys got screwed by big companies like Marvel and DC. You know, Jack Kirby is the most flagrant example. So if you know anything about the image revolution, it did spark to a certain point. I think it, you know, whether or not it enhanced independent comic creators' rights and stuff like that, it certainly brought attention to the fact that you could just create your own stuff and keep the rights to it. You know, a lot of the kids who grew up like myself reading those Image comics, you know, it wasn't just the comics themselves, but the philosophy behind it, right? This idea that you could create stuff, own it, and reap the profits from it, and, you know, make a comic, make toys, or get toys made by other companies, make deals, and do all that yourself, right? So a lot of those ideas start with early Image, and a lot of those ideas are what's talked about, or at least, you know, metaphorically somewhat in this comic here. So what you need to know about this comic, again, Dave Sim writes it. His character Cerebus is how I feel like saying it. Cerebus. I've heard that. Let's go with Cerebus, I guess. Cerebus guest stars, and look at it this way, the way this comic is kind of, it was hard to read and understand as a kid, but I pretty much figured out that Spawn in this comic represents Tom McFarlane, and Cerebus is Dave Sim. So pretty kind of off the wall cover for Spawn, I would say. You know, the fact that it's mostly black and white, and then just that little section, it's a gag cover, which is fine, right? And Dave Sim did not draw this cover here, literally all McFarlane. So McFarlane kind of aping Dave Sim's style, I guess. So the story's called Crossing Over. So last issue we saw Spawn fighting Angela, getting sucked into kind of his own cape. Defeating her, she flies off, and he touches a button on her lance, and he kind of disappears in some other dimension, or is kind of swept away. It's not really explained. And then that brings us to this issue here. Kind of cool shot to get started off with, right? Reminding you of, you know, kind of the elements of Spawn visually, but again, all of the talk and stuff kind of refers to Spawn to a certain extent, but then Wanda and Cyan get kind of morphed into the actual Wanda, Tom McFarlane's wife, and Cyan his daughter, right? So not Al Simmons' daughter and not Al Simmons' wife. And it's a very kind of mostly, you know, almost dreamlike, surrealist kind of vibe throughout. McFarlane's really pushing, you know, hard on the design, the McFarlane designs, which I like, you know, this page here what a great design where, you know, Spawn's at the top. All you get is the cape enveloping the rest of the page. You know, this here's not necessarily, well, yeah, you know, you've got all this section here that's more of the cape, but then shards, and the way he shadowed it here eventually end up being shards of panels that he draws in. Very cool idea. Some vibes, some Howard Chaykin vibes here with the flag and everything, right? And it's just kind of a quick recap of the first few issues of Spawn, the characters we've been introduced to. So collage kind of drawing, right? Like I said, a very designy drawing, but looks great. Again, reminding us of last few issues, right? Going through the pits of hell. That happened not to Spawn, it happened to Billy Kincaid, right? And this is where it kind of got interesting. Even as a kid, I kind of understood where he was going with it. Like, I didn't understand the aspect that this was actually Todd McFarlane kind of living the story through his character. I was still literally thinking it was Spawn, but when we get to these next pages, we understand. So I'll read a little bit. Excuse me. It is the alleyway, it's not the alleyway. There's a line of men, their hands are bound behind them. They are hooded, helpless. I don't know them, but I feel a connection to them. Without them, Spawn, he could not exist. Oh God, no. Something flames lights their forms. Something terrible flames before which they tremble with fear. I don't want to see, but I look anyway. I don't want to know everything. So these are basically, you know, past comic creators who've had their creations stolen from them by the huge companies. And by huge companies, mostly I mean Marvel and DC, right? And that's kind of, again, a visual representation here and an easy way out of not getting sued by using the likeness of all these Marvel and DC characters that you probably can identify most of them. I think I've got them all down. There's just one or two that I'm really not quite sure. So yeah, Spawn. Okay, so they are noble. They are heroes, champions, watchmen, avengers, defenders, men of steel. In case you didn't know, women of tomorrow, gods of thunder, crusaders. So kind of hitting you over the head with it. They are justice. They are nobility. They are trapped. They are screaming. Behind me, the hooded men tremble beneath their hoods. They are weeping. Right. So again, the creators. Real quick: Joker, Wonder Man, pretty sure. Thing, Flash, Juggernaut, Doctor Doom, Hulk, Shazam, Captain Marvel, Venom, Batman, Wonder Woman, Wolverine, and here's where it gets tricky. So I think that's Beast, Green Lantern, Captain America. Not sure about this guy. Maybe Colossus? I don't know, you know, between this guy and this. And then there's a yellow glove here. That's always been a mystery to me. If anyone knows, let me know in the comments. Or anyone thinks they know. So, of course, Spawn just, you know, uses power. And he's no effect. Can't do anything. Can't break the prison open, right? And what he's saying is that, you know, he has the power to be creator-owned. But for all these heroes, you know, that we know of from Marvel and DC, it's too late. They're imprisoned forever. And this was always interesting to me because, I mean, Tom McFarlane drawings at that point were far and few between for me. You know, I didn't have access to Invasion like I do now, you know, having bought it in, you know, old bins, dollar bins, I think, and seeing it. But this is like more of an image kind of period version of Superman, so it's interesting. Obviously, McFarlane exaggerates something, the cape, of course, but also the spit curls, just insanely huge. I would have... His Superman in Invasion is I've seen a pinup or two he's done where it's kind of as well, but I do find this kind of version of Superman kind of interesting, even though he's fully silhouetted for trademark reasons. But like these proportion stuff, kind of a little bit Dark Knight, I guess, is probably where that comes from. Be nice to see McFarlane draw like a Superman story with this look for Superman. So Spawn becomes cosmic. He is all and then connected to all and sees all, right? You know, that old story. So he's kind of, you know, gathering the power of the universe and he still can't do anything about it. And Violator kind of represents the greedy companies, you know. This, again, all symbolism and metaphor in this issue, right? Not a literal story, but, you know, there's subtext that they're trying to get to. And sometimes, like I said, I'm not going to read all the narration stuff, but it does hit you over the head to make sure you kind of understand. Now as an adult, I kind of see it. Maybe as a kid, like I was still having issues. You know, this is the first time I was exposed to these kind of concepts of like, well, this is Spawn, but he's actually, you know, kind of a cipher for Todd McFarlane, the creator, and his struggles and the struggles of other creators. And, you know, this is, again, that early image movement. Didn't just get us into drawing comics and being into comics and buying these comics, but also kind of the business of comics, interestingly enough, and creator rights and all that stuff, right? I'm assuming before Image, that was a very small part of, comics fandom that was talking about that stuff. And with Image, whatever you think of them, that the discussion about creator-owned creations and art and comics started big time and was popularized. Again, these proportions for Superman, like, I think McFarlane would do a pretty awesome job. Yeah, do the exaggerated McFarlane cape for Superman. I think that would look pretty cool. It would make sense almost with that whole alien thing. It could totally work. And why not? It's comic books. Of course it works. So all of a sudden Spawn gets decolorized and meets Cerebus. And basically is now in Cerebus's world. Oh, man. To have to say that name over and over. And an interesting thing happens. I don't know if this is McFarlane or Dave Sim, but you start to get backgrounds which represent or not represent, but well, I guess represent Cerebus's world, the black and white world, and the kind of backgrounds you would see in his comics. So I feel like sometimes they do use actual stats, pictures, and stuff like they're doing here. Don't know how well it works, in this comic, just for these two shots, but at least it gets the idea across. Just graphically, I don't know how successful that is, especially with Todd's art. Like the mixing of these foreground figures in the background, not so great to me. And then, yeah, so is this Tom McFarlane drawing his house? Like, does his house pretty much look like this? Yeah. Could be. So this just shows him, like, already, at this point, when McFarlane drew this issue and Dave Sim wrote it, probably in around Spawn 6 or 7, he's already made millions of dollars on those first few issues of Spawn, right? I don't know if you guys, there's an interview with McFarlane you can check out. I don't know the name or whatever, but it'd probably be easy to find, where he explains, he had figured out that for Spawn #1, he needed to sell something around like 25,000 copies, right? To make as much money as he was making on a typical issue of Spider-Man. What Marvel was paying him to do an issue of Spider-Man. He had to sell 25,000 copies of Spawn. So he was like, I think I can do at least that. So he was like, I'll either make as much or more, right? Well, he didn't end up selling 25,000 copies of Spawn #1, right? He ended up selling like 1.2 million or something. So listen, instant millionaire at that point. If he wasn't already, because he's pretty smart with his money and, he's been paid pretty well, I would think, for doing a Spider-Man comic back in the day. He's probably one of the top paid artists, and he's probably, put his money aside and invested in stuff. So if he wasn't a millionaire before, he definitely was after Spawn #1. So, by this point, even though this is issue 10, they're probably writing it and creating it around 6 or 7, when 6 or 7 are coming out. He's already sold 6 issues where he's selling millions and millions of copies every issue. So the money just, if he became a millionaire with Spawn #1, well then Spawn #2, Spawn #3, Spawn #4, still selling in the millions, was just adding to that fortune, right? So that's clearly what allowed him to start Todd Toys, which, more power to him. I mean, the guy's a business genius, I guess. Well, I mean, let's not say that. He's been successful in business, still is today, but he's had some slight falls here and there. Not to criticize him. Most successful people do. Yeah, and I mean, the rest of the issue is just basically Cerebus telling Spawn, Tom McFarlane, how great he's got it because, he, his creator, Spawn, because again, it kind of gets mixed in, his creator kept all the rights, and that's why he can benefit from his creation. At least in the early 90s, he could. From the comic book, Eventually, like I said, with the toys and stuff, he was set. Didn't have to count on the comic book so much. And, big kind of, manifesto at the end there. Spawn is trademark and copyright Tom McFarlane. Cerebus is trademark and copyright Dave Sim forever. So, again, hammering you over the head a little bit with the concept, but I do think it's an important concept in philosophy that really, again, came to the fore in those early 90s with Image coming out and stuff. As young guys, we weren't just interested in drawing other people's characters. We were interested in creating our own characters. Why? Because we saw how successful Image Comics was. Obviously they'd made this success on known quantities at Marvel and DC, but, right time, they struck the iron and made it big with their own creations. So pretty inspiring stuff for sure. Still pushing me to make comics today. Yeah, not much to talk about with the fan art here. A lot of stuff copied from the actual artists, right? Mark, so, real quick, just because, like, even as a kid, I could kind of point out these swipes. So, swipe from Jim Valentino, swipe from Eric Larson. I don't know about that one. That's a swipe from Dale Keown. That's pretty sure a swipe. Maybe Jim Lee. Anyways, here's a swipe from Jim Lee for sure. Swipe off Mark Silvestri. A swipe off of Jim Lee. And that looks to be it for the swipes there. Is that Rorschach? Okay, yeah. Now I get it. Way back in the day, I wasn't sure who these guys all were. I knew Cerebus, obviously, at this point. But I guess that's supposed to be Marv. There's Sandman, and there's Rorschach. Hadn't read Watchmen yet. Once I discovered Alan Moore a few months later, maybe. Eventually I got the trade paperback. Amazing stuff, obviously. We'll review that at some point, I'm sure. Armature says the better you draw, the better we color. Public service announcements from Ollie Optics. They colored a lot of early Image comics. This is a fun comic. Stupid. That double page spread where he gets his cape caught in the staples. That's genius. And kind of interesting to see that there's an ad for gay comics here. Not that I have a problem with it. Don't care at all. But kind of hilarious. And Dooms 4 by Rob Liefeld. Whatever came of that project movie that was supposed to be with Tom Cruise, right? Something like that. I think that's the infamous meeting Rob Liefeld was late at that he talks about meeting Tom Cruise. So movie deal didn't go through, obviously. Maybe lost out because he was late. Possibly. Anyways, that is my review of Spawn number 10, guys. If you have any comments or concerns, let me know below, and I'll try to answer your questions. And if I've asked any questions and you have the answers, let me know in the comments down below as well. If you are still watching the channel and you are subscribed, thank you so much. I really appreciate the loyalty. If you are not subscribed but you're watching, why not do so below? It only takes a quick second for you. Really helps the channel out, helps us grow. It truly does, and helps get us out there to other people who are into comic books like we are. So thank you guys for watching, and have an awesome day.
Like, subscribe, like, subscribe.
King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KingComics.CA, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby.